I am
There you go.
awesome. I am a senior content designer at a software company called Atlassian, where I handle all of the content for Jira Cloud automation. So that's user documentation, UI copy, error messages, help text that pops up on the screen, things like that. Like many of you, I was hired originally as a technical writer. I was hired as the company's first ever junior technical writer. So fun fact. And then over time, the job became less about writing software documentation and more about just writing any content that the user needs to see. So that is help documentation, of course, but it is also things like, error messages, button labels, tooltips, menu items, things like that. Before I get started, I just need to get rid of this Zoom overlay, which is in the middle of my screen. There we go. Cool. One last thing before we get into it is I originally created this presentation for a content design audience. And so I've tried my best to tweak it to be more for this audience of documentarians. Just to keep in mind, though, some of these examples will be a bit more content design specific, but I have tweaked it as best I can so it's relevant to all of you folks as well. So just something to keep in mind before we get into it. But yeah, let's get into it. So fight for your promotion in 3 steps. This was a topic that I thought about a lot. And it's a topic I have thought about a lot over the years because for me, promotions are awkward. They're super, super awkward. I always, especially as a junior, I always had these questions in my head of like, how do I go about talking about promotions? And how do I know I'm ready? So this is why I came up with this talk. And it seems to have resonated with people over the years. So I'm really happy to share it with you all here today. This Write the Docs community is so meaningful to me. I remember I attended the Write the Docs conference a few years ago. It was in the Justice Museum in Sydney, which was an incredible venue. And it was such a welcoming community and really, really informative talk. So I'm so honored to be here today. But in my mind, promotions are awkward because there's always this question of like, how do I know I'm ready? How do I know I'm ready to start talking about promotions? I might think I'm ready. I might think I'm doing great in my current role. I might think I'm ready to be promoted. How do I really know I'm ready to be promoted? And then if I think I'm ready, there's always this follow-up question of how do I justify myself and the value I bring to my company? When a company promotes you, they are investing in you as an individual. They are investing in your future, the value that you will bring. And they'll want a return on that investment. So how do I justify myself and the value that I bring to the company?
Sorry, Kevin, just quickly, we can see the presenter notes as well. Is that something you've intended to show?
No, but
yeah,
cool. Thank you. And even if you settle all of those questions, there is the final question of how do I start that conversation with my manager? How do I start talking to them about fighting for a promotion? And so in this talk, I will go through the 3 steps that I went through to fight for my promotion to a more senior role. And those 3 steps are, number 1, perform an audit of your skills. Number 2, stop and reflect on past projects. And number 3, collect references from colleagues. Along the way, I'll give you some frameworks, some templates, some examples from when I fought for a promotion to a more senior role. But just something to keep in mind is that we can't cover everything in this talk. Each company is different. Each company is going to have different each company has different culture. Companies have different processes, different people, different practices. So obviously we can't cover everything in this talk, but hopefully this can serve as a good starting point for you personally. Before we begin, I just want to briefly go through why you would want to go for a promotion in the first place, just because I think it'll help frame the rest of the talk. So there are a few reasons you might want to pursue a promotion. For example, you might be looking for the challenge. You might be looking to take on bigger and tougher problems. Maybe the leadership aspect appeals to you. Maybe you want to have a bigger hand in influencing stakeholders or mentoring your teammates or advocating for your craft of technical writing. Or maybe it's the impact that appeals to you. Maybe you want to take ownership of your work more and have a bigger hand in impacting company objectives. And whatever the case, there are no right or wrong reasons for pursuing a promotion. But I think it's important just to reflect on what it is that's driving you, because at the end of the day, that will keep you motivated throughout this process. It'll also impact how you view these 3 steps that I'm going to go through. For me personally, my motivating factor was the challenge. I really wanted to take on bigger and tougher problems, and that's the lens through which we will talk through these 3 steps here today. So without further ado, step 1 is to audit your skills. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by auditing your skills? Well, what I mean is you reflect on what your current skills and capabilities are. You take the time to identify where it is you want to improve in your current role, and you use all that information to show that you're ready to take on new challenges. Let's dive a little bit more into what that actually means. So step 1 is to audit your skills, and what this really means is that you look at how your company defines your role. What skills and capabilities are you expected to have? For example, as a technical writer, you might be expected to write procedural, reference, and conceptual documentation. But also, you might be expected to monitor documentation metrics and pick out trends and areas of improvement. You might be expected to manage your team's style guides and vocab lists. You might be expected to do any number of things. And the truth is, you might be better at some things than others. So it's important to take stock of what skills and capabilities you're expected to have and assess where you are in your role. Figure out what are you good at and what are you not good at. And it's important to be honest with yourself here. Be honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you aren't good at, and revisit this list every few weeks. It doesn't have to be every few weeks. It could be every month, could be every quarter. Set some time with your manager to talk about how you're going in your current role and where you want to improve. One thing that I do think is important here, though, is that it's important to have this time explicitly set aside in your calendar. Maybe you just have like a little recurring meeting like once a month just to say, hey, growth chat or skills check or whatever. Just to have that explicitly defined. Because if it's not explicitly defined, it's very easy to let life take over. It's very easy to let other projects take over, and then you never take the time to reflect on yourself. It's very easy to let that go. Let's have a look at practically what this looks like. At Atlassian, we're lucky enough to have these skills pretty well defined and laid out. And we use Trello boards to track our skills progress. So at the top here, you can see these column headers where we define like how proficient you are in each skill, from learning from novice through to master. And then you can see down below here, we have all these skills that we're expected to have. So as content designers at Atlassian, we're expected to have skills in content strategy and critique and facilitation and influence and communication, technical knowledge, things like that. And here you can see I've put these cards in the column where I think I am at in terms of proficiency. And then you can use this as a point of reference. So I can say, look, I'm competent at these things, or I'm really good at these things, but I want to improve in these things. Or you can say, look, I'm really good at all of these things. Maybe it's time that I move on to a more senior role. But either way, you can use this as a tool for yourself to reflect and to figure out where you want to go next. However, What if your company doesn't have these capabilities defined? At Atlassian, we're very lucky. We have these capabilities very well defined for pretty much all of our roles. At other companies, it might not be the case. You know, at other companies, maybe technical writing is a dirty craft. Maybe it's a more neglected craft. And maybe your company just doesn't have these capabilities defined. What do you do then? There are a couple of resources that you can look to online. For example, GovUK do a very good job of defining all of their roles. So this is what they say on technical writing. And here, the reason why this is useful is that you can then see, okay, these are the skills that are required, at least at GovUK, for a technical writer. And you can see how that changes as you move from technical writer to lead technical writer. Their content design roles are very well defined. They've got content design roles defined from like associate and junior all the way through to lead and like head of content. So GovUK is a really good resource. And the idea here is that if your company doesn't have the capabilities of a technical writer defined, you can look to GovUK and say, okay, look, this is what an organization like GovUK expects. Maybe I can create my own framework, my own little growth profile for myself, and use GovUK as a reference point, as a starting point. You can use it as a starting point and then talk to your manager to build it out and add and remove things. Another resource you can look to is Intercom. A few years ago, Intercom made the decision to make their content design and product design roles public. Again, I know this is more of a documentarian audience. I get that, but there are a lot of overlap here. You know, there's overlap in terms of you know, how you build product knowledge, how you work with stakeholders, how you influence product vision and strategy. So it might be worth checking out as well if you do need inspiration to build out your own growth profile. These links here, I know it's a bit of an effort to type them out. So I'm happy to share these links afterwards on the meetup page, just so you don't have to scramble to type these out if you're interested in viewing them. Oh yes, and so yeah, so Intercom, their growth profiles, what I like here is that they've got it all listed out at the top there, from associate through to senior principal, and you can see how each skill evolves as you move up the ladder. So again, you can use that as inspiration for your own growth profiles when you're building it out. So you've ordered your skills, and step 2 is to stop and reflect on your past projects. And this is super important because I don't know about all of you, but in my world, we move from project to project very quickly. Sometimes I'll move on to the next project before the last project is even done. I'll draft my documentation, I'll hit publish, and before I even get a chance to look at the metrics for that documentation, I have to draft the next thing, or I'm about to publish the next thing. So we move from project to project very quickly, and it's very easy to stop and reflect. But stopping and reflecting is super important, because when you stop and you reflect on your work, it gives you a chance to think about the impact that you are having. What metrics are you moving for your team, or for your product, or for your organization? These are super important things to think about. And when we don't stop and reflect, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to think about our impact. We rob ourselves of the opportunity to think about all of these metrics. And these metrics are important because when you can point to these metrics that you're impacting, you can use this as proof. Use this as proof that you're ready to take on a new challenge. And it's important to remember here, a lot of people think about metrics as money. It doesn't have to be money necessarily. In our world, metrics can take the form of, you could be impacting your organization, of course, but you could also be impacting your team. You could be impacting the people around you. Maybe you're helping your team write better, or maybe you're helping your team understand your product better. There are other ways to think about impact other than just, oh, here's how much money we made for the company, or, oh, here's this documentation I published, here's how many views it got. There are more nuanced ways of thinking about impact. And there are all sorts of ways that we have an impact on people day to day. So it's important to stop and reflect and think about the impact that you're having. Because ultimately, this is proof. It's proof that you're ready to take on more responsibility. So how do we stop and reflect on our projects? There's a couple of frameworks that I find helpful. For example, you can use situation behavior impact. So situation being, what problem were you trying to solve? How did this work come to you? What's the general context of the project? Behavior. What did you do? Who did you work with? What decisions did you make? And how did you make these trade-offs? And impact. What was the outcome of the work? What impact did it have on customers or stakeholders? Another framework you can use is the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. You see this a lot in job interviews as well. So situation being the general context, what team you work on, what product you're working on. Task, what was the specific problem or task you had to address? Action, what did you do? Who did you collaborate with? What decisions did you make? How did you make those decisions? And result, did you solve the problem? What impact did it have? So these are the frameworks that you can use to reflect on your projects. Here's an example from when I was fighting for my promotion to a more senior role. This is a project where I just kind of wrote down my reflections. So situation, I moved into a new team in April 2020. Everyone was telling me that, and our customers were telling me that our documentation needed improvement. So behavior, here's what I did. I gathered all the feedback from all the different channels I could think of, and I created a Trello board to perform an affinity sort and identify the general themes that I could tackle. And impact, as a result of all of this, after all of the work that I did, it's led to an increase in traffic from Google, and it led to improvements in terms of navigation and findability for our documentation. So this is a very real example. I had to scrub out some, sensitive details, obviously, but this is a way you can reflect on your projects and reflect on your work. And again, I just want to reiterate as well, it's important to do this on a regular cadence, because when you move from project to project very quickly, you can forget these little details. You can forget, who did you talk to, and what decisions did you make, and how did you make these trade-offs? You can forget these little details that are so important. So it's important to do this, when a project ends, because if you get to the end of the financial year, it can be very hard to get all those details out of your brain. So do it when it's fresh. So you've reflected on your past projects, and step 3 is to collect references from colleagues. And this is super important in fighting for your promotion, because in our world, in what we do, teamwork is so important. I think as documentarians, we stand or fall on our relationships with other people. We are often relying on other people to be our subject matter experts. We are relying on other people to help us write, to review our work. Teamwork is so important. We stand or fall on our relationships with our stakeholders. But it's also important because if you can get references from colleagues, it's a sign of your influence. And this is really important because the more you climb that career ladder, the more senior you get, the more you are expected to influence people. It's not that as you get more senior, you become better at writing documentation. Maybe you do, but often what actually happens is your sphere of influence gets bigger. That's what defines who you are in terms of your seniority on the ladder. I was speaking to Atlassian's head of design a while back, and he was like, well, leadership for me means that every decision I make has to improve every single designer at Atlassian. So that's his sphere of influence. So references from colleagues are so important because it's a sign of influence. And that is the key thing that changes as you move up the career ladder, is your influence. But the other thing as well is it just makes you sound more legit. When people vouch for you, your case for a promotion gets so much stronger than if you had just built a case on your own. We can look to an example here. This is a comment I got from an engineering manager for some work I did for the growth team. It says, Kevin volunteered to do some content design work without being prompted. Not only did he get onboarded very quickly, but he also helped improve our feature readiness process, and he got the content done overnight. Now, I could have said all of this using situation, behavior, impact, or situation, task, action, result. I could have said this myself, but it hits different when it comes from a stakeholder. It hits different when it comes from someone else talking about it for me. So those were the 3 steps. Now we put it all together. So you've audited your skills. So you know what you want to improve on, or you know or you'll know that you're ready for a new challenge. You've got a portfolio of projects. So you've worked with your manager to find bigger projects to work on. And you've got testimonials from your colleagues to really drive home that you're influencing people and ready to move up to the next level. What do you do with these things? Well, the key here is that you can use them as a point of reference. You can use all that information to drive a conversation with your manager. You can take it to your manager as ammunition to say, hey, I am ready to take on bigger, more important challenges. You can use it as proof that you're ready for a more senior role. Before I leave you today, I just thought I'd share some bonus tips, just some tips that I've learned about career growth and development throughout this process. The first is to work with your manager. This is super important. You know, your manager at work can be your biggest cheerleader. They can be a driver of your career growth. They can help you find projects. They can help you find the right projects to improve whatever skills you've identified for yourself. So they are incredibly important. It's important to have a positive relationship with your manager. It's important to work with your manager. And I bring this up because I always just assumed that your manager is just there just to make sure you're doing your work. And maybe that's true in some organizations, but in my work experience, your manager is so much more than that. They can be so much more than that, as long as you make it happen. The second thing is to be proactive about your career growth. You know, be proactive about identifying what skills you want to improve. Be proactive about thinking about where you want to take your career. Because after all, it is your career. You're the one most affected by it. And if you aren't thinking about it, no one else will. So try to be proactive about your career growth. And finally, try to work past imposter syndrome. This is something I talk about with my colleagues a lot. Imposter syndrome is that feeling that you get when you feel like you don't quite belong in your role, or you feel like you're not quite good enough for your role. And it's important to remember in this context because it can happen when you are pushing your boundaries and moving out of your comfort zone. And imposter syndrome is a big topic. This could be an entire half-hour talk in and of itself. So maybe it's a topic for another time. I can't really cover that here. But when it happens, try to recognize it. Try to recognize, hey, you know, this isn't, I am good enough for my role. This is just imposter syndrome talking. Try to work through it as you build your case for promotion. So just as a recap, the 3 steps to fighting for your promotion: perform an audit of your skills, stop and reflect on past projects, and finally, collect references from colleagues. Thank you so much for spending the time with me here today to talk through fighting for a promotion. Thank you so much for your time. Like I said, it's such an honor to be here to talk to all of you. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That was really insightful. I literally had this conversation with my manager recently about, you know, promotions. And you're right. It is kind of a hard task because you're trying to, you know, make sure you've got enough data points and you've got enough, you know, referrals, and making sure that people are actually, you know, you've had that influence. So it always helps if you keep like some sort of a log of what you've done every project. And me personally, at the end of every, like, I've been a contractor for a large number of years, so at the end of every project I have, you know, had this own retro sort of a thing which I kept about what went well, what didn't actually go well, and how things could be improved. So those sort of things really help when it comes to, you know, making sure you're fighting for your promotion. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just come off the mic, off mute, and yeah, feel free to ask Kevin directly.
So Karen, a question about how to gather references.
Yeah. So I mean, it's
Go
ahead.
Yeah. So how to gather references when the colleagues regard technical documentation as unimportant or even irritating?
It's an interesting. I love how you said "or even irritating." That's so funny.
Yeah.
I 100%, I 100% feel you. I think maybe one way you can think about it then is less around the output that you created. So maybe it's less about asking them, hey, I just finished this project. I created this awesome procedural doc. What do you think about it? And it's more about, hey, um, maybe if the documentation led to an increase in we led to an increase in signups for our product, or it led to a decrease in support tickets. That's a good example. If it led to like a decrease in support tickets, then maybe you go to the support team and you just say, hey, can you just write a couple of sentences about how this documentation improved your work? Can you write a couple of sentences about how you always direct customers to this awesome doc that I wrote for you? Maybe it's less about, okay, here's the thing that I wrote. How did it make you feel? And it's more about, okay, a while ago I wrote this thing. What impact did it have on your life? And go from there. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, the problem I find is sometimes they may not find what you're doing is quote unquote valuable.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point, and I've seen that before as well. But again, that's where thinking about impact comes in, because if you can like quantify, if you can look at this thing that you did, and then think about, okay, what is the impact actually? Is it I wrote this thing and I decreased the number of support tickets decreased over a month. Or I wrote this thing and then all of a sudden now people are searching for our feature more and signing up more. Thinking about it in those terms, in terms of the impact, can really help. You might still have people who will argue, no one reads the docs anyway. You might have things like that still, but at least if you can think about the impact that you're having, it'll give you some ammunition to fight back.
Yeah, well, one question I had, Kevin, was when you actually got all of this, ready, and you've got all the references, you've got all the data points, you've got, you've written up your arguments. How do you actually present them? Would it be like one-on-one, or would it be more like a document that you give to your manager saying this is what I've done, like an actual report of a sort of a thing?
We were very lucky. We're very lucky at Atlassian in the sense that the promotion process is formalized.
Yeah.
And so we, like, at the time it literally was, okay, compile all these things, put it on a document and give it to your manager, right? It was that kind of thing. The process isn't quite like that now, but I would still argue that you can compile all this information and then use that as a reference point, as a way to drive the conversation, to say, hey, hello, manager. I've been thinking about promotion lately because I just completed these 2 or 3 projects over the last quarter, and look at the impact that I had. And look, last week we just shipped this product, and here's the documentation. And look, the engineering manager is all like, oh, how cool is this? So you can, even if the process isn't formalized, you don't have to necessarily compile it into a doc and say, hey, manager, have a look. But you can use it as like a reference point to drive the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a question from Neil. Considering newbie in the field, how do you ask for more challenges than the regular assignments to get the exposure?
This is a good question. I mean, I think I would take this in 2 parts personally. I would probably say, in terms of the regular assignments that you are getting, certainly look at the results of those assignments, and certainly try to identify the impact that you've had. And then in terms of moving forward, in terms of asking for more challenges, you can say, maybe try to pinpoint exactly what it is that you want to be pursuing. For example, when you say ask for more challenges, what exactly does that mean? Is that you want to take on more strategic kind of work? Is it more you want to move into like a different product, a different space to work in? Try to figure out exactly what it is you want, and then go from there. I find it's a lot easier to help someone if that person is a bit more specific and they know specifically what it is they want. So maybe try to reflect on what it is you're after, and that's where those skills matrices can come in, can be helpful. If you go to like GovUK and they have all the skills listed, you might think, oh yeah, I want to work on this skill specifically. Or you might say, I want to work on these group of skills specifically. I want to improve there. And then that way your manager can then help you find projects that are that will help you practice those skills.
Awesome. I hope that answers the question, Neil. If you've got more questions, feel free to come up the microphone and ask Kevin directly. We've got a comment from Michael saying that companies' knowledge docs are valued by customers and supports. The only problem the experience is getting docs out fast enough. So yeah, I think that's always a challenge when you sort of under-resourced, or we've got, only X amount of tech writers handling multiple products. It's always a challenge getting docs out quickly enough, at least with the release pipeline.
Very common. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any more questions from anyone? I know it's a small sort of a cozy group here, so feel free to ask any more questions. If not, I think that's pretty much it.
Hello.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah, I have a question. Hello. Thank you for the session. It was great. I just have a question. Like when you said that you be specific, since I'm newbie, I'm getting confused, like where I want to transact next in my career. Because there are so many opportunities, and every time I come across something new, and like that's quite interesting to learn and get into that stuff. But then again, is that something, how will I know that is that something I really want to do? Because now it's been in my current profile, I'm actually getting few projects, but it's not something I'm getting more challenged at all. Like it's always been very specific and straightforward. So how to get on that?
It's a very tough question, because it's something I always struggled with. I remember when I was new. The problem here is you don't know what you don't know. My manager would often ask me, Kevin, where do you want to take your career? What do you want to pursue next? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't actually know. So like a common problem here is you don't know what you don't know. Here, I think some possible solutions are attending events like this can help, and just networking with other documentarians, other technical writers can help, because then they can give you ideas about, you might hear, oh yeah, I'm doing this kind of project and I'm doing this in my company. You might hear that and think, oh, I could maybe try and take that on in my company. So I guess the short answer is networking with other people can give you ideas about the kinds of projects you could be pursuing, or the kinds of skills you could be pursuing. Is experienced at managing technical writers, they might have ideas about the kinds of things you could be pursuing. Or if they're really switched on, they'll have their eyes and ears throughout the organization, and they'll have some knowledge about what is going on throughout the company, and they might be able to direct you to the right kinds of projects where you're needed. But this is very tough. This is honestly, I have struggled with this in the past. Is you don't know what you don't know, and therefore you don't know what it is you could be pursuing. So, but I think definitely building relationships with other people, other tech writers outside of the company can be very very handy there. Oh, and Colin makes a very good point. Actually, yes, that's very true.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, one thing, I think good thing, just to add to that, Kevin, I think it's always good to have a good manager, because they'll probably be, they'll help you a lot. Like my current manager, he actively gets me engaged with other tech, not really like with other teams in our area or our region, which are not necessarily aligned with what I'm doing, but just to reach out, network, make sure I've got, friends and relationships happening there, because you never know. They'll be reaching out to me at some point saying, oh, you're the only tech writer in this region, can you help us just review this content we've put together. Maybe there's not much writing required, but at least I get my eyes in on something new. I learn something myself, but it also is an opportunity for me to then, broaden my area of expertise in a way. Yeah, great comment from Michael. And I agree, Kevin, definitely revisiting this talk before my next employee review. Cool. I think that's pretty much it. And if anyone's got any last questions, burning questions, if not, I'm happy to wrap up.
So Kevin, you said that Lysian said that you were one of the first employees to take as a technical writer. Is that right?
I was the first batch of junior technical writers that they hired. There was two of us.
Okay. All right.
There was two of us. It was the first time they had ever hired a junior technical writer. I was fresh out of uni, didn't know a thing about software or technical writing, but I thought I could do it because I spent a lot of time playing board games and reading board game rule books. And so I made the argument in my interview that if I know what a good board game documentation looks like, I think I know what a good software documentation looks like. And I guess it convinced them enough to take a shot at me. So yeah.
Kevin,
what?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
So how do they know they needed a technical writer?
How did they know they needed one?
Yeah.
We already had a practice, like a technical writing practice out of Atlassian. It had already existed for there was someone in the company who was driving. They were like, oh, it would be great if we could hire some juniors just to mentor and train them up. I think it was just like a passion project of theirs. So they hired 2 junior technical writers in. But yeah, we had a practice of technical writers at that point already. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think originally technical writers at Atlassian were in the I think like the QA org. So there must have been some need from like the support team for documentation. So I think that's where it came from. But that's long before my time, so I can't speak much to that.
No, because that's when you explain it that way, the premise of your topic today makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that they actually wanted to. Someone had was probably trying to promote technical writing as culture within the organization. Hiring juniors was a part of it. Interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We've been I think we've been trying for years to slowly build out our initially technical writing community, but now content design community. And it's still an ongoing process of building it out and maturing the knowledge throughout the company. So
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin, you do know there's only 36 more hours left for the call for proposals for Write the Doc. So hopefully you can get a proposal in mind. That would be really awesome.
No, I wanted to, but I'm actually on a family trip in December, so I can't.
That's all right. No, what a try.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But thank you so much for having me. This has been really great, and I hope you got something from all of this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I really loved it. Thanks again for coming on board and sharing your knowledge. So like I said before, I've recorded this video. I'll just do some more post edits and I'll put it up on the Write the Docs, and I'll ping everyone with the link to the video.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone else. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.